Appreciate you joining me today. It is August 1st. We're going to be looking in 2 Kings today. Check the description for the reading. It's Nahum 1 through 3, which deals with Nineveh, the destruction of Nineveh. But 2 Kings 23 is Josiah. Touched on Josiah just a little bit last week, and we're sort of picking up. We're not picking up at the beginning of Josiah. This is Josiah's reforms. I'll stop blabbering. The king, it just goes through and it talks about all the things Josiah did. The things he tore down, the things he instituted. He removes the idolatrous priests, whom the kings of Judah had ordained, brought out the wooden image, tore down the ritual booths of the perverted persons. All these things. He's cleaning house. He's cleaning house. He's getting things right. Doing all these things. He read in the hearing all the words of the book of the covenant which had been found in the house of the Lord. If you're familiar with that account, let's see, some of the things he does and what I wanted to touch on. Come down a little bit as he's just cleaning house with all the idolatry, kind of going scorched earth. I want to start reading in verse 15. And Josiah is an interesting character, needless to say. Verse 15, Moreover, the altar that was at Bethel, in the high place which Jeroboam the son of Nebat, who made Israel sin, had made, both that altar and the high place he broke down. He burned the high place and crushed it to powder, and burned the wooden image. As Josiah turned, he saw the tombs that were on the mountains, and he sent and took the bones out of the tombs, and burned them on the altar, and defiled it according to the word of the Lord which the man of God proclaimed, who proclaimed these words. Then he said, What gravestone is this that I see? And so the men of the city told him, It is the tomb of the man of God, who came from Judah and proclaimed these things, which you have done against the altar of Bethel. And he said, Let him alone, let no one move his bones. And so they let his bones alone, with the bones of the prophet, who came from Samaria. And then goes on and talks about some of the other things he did as well. And you can see there at the bottom, restoring the Passover. All right, that account, though, that altar that was at Bethel, I want you to think about, this is 2 Kings chapter 23. And what I wanted you to think about was that altar in Bethel has been there a long time. Wherever Jeroboam is, right? Jeroboam is when the kingdom divides. And so you have to go all the way back to 1 Kings, where you're introduced to Jeroboam. And in that prophecy about when Jeroboam does that, and you have the Josiah prophecy. I can't talk today. Pardon me. My point is this: that altar in Bethel, that's been there a long time. A long time. Through a lot of kings. Now remember where Bethel is. Okay, because we're talking about Jeroboam had 10 tribes, Rehoboam the 2, right? Bethel is north of Jerusalem, but it's in Israel. It's not in Judah. But the thing is, Israel has now been carried off captive in the previous chapters. And so now Josiah has an opportunity to go up into Israel, and he's going to take care of that altar at Bethel. It's been there since Jeroboam, and he says, effectively, enough is enough. He goes up to that high place that Jeroboam had made, and how Israel had sinned, and he crushes it to powder, and he burns the images. Sin had been there since Jeroboam. And our point is simple. Does sin have an expiration date? It had been there a long time. It had been there a long time. It was a monument. And Josiah says, enough's enough. And he goes up in Israel and he destroys it. Now, as he does that, he turns and he sees the tombs that are on the mountain. And he takes the bones out of the tomb and he burns them on the altar. And he defiles it according to the word of the Lord. That prophecy was made in the life of Jeroboam. That prophecy had been in place a long time. Is there any expiration date on prophecy? Not until it is fulfilled. It had gone unfulfilled a long time. Did that matter? No. The prophet, the man of God, had spoken. The Lord had spoken through the man of God, and the prophecy was made. Josiah was going to be born, and there were going to be bones burnt on that altar, defiling it. And Josiah, in its as we read it, Josiah, he just turns and he saw the tombs that are on the mountain. He says, I know what I'm going to do. And he takes the bones out of the tombs and he burns them on the altar and he defiles it according to the word of the Lord. There's no expiration on sin. There is no expiration on prophecy. And then he sees the bones, as it speaks about it, he sees the gravestone. What gravestone is this? It is the tomb of the man of God who came from Judah and proclaimed these things which you have done against the altar of Bethel. Josiah says, leave him alone. Let him alone. Let no one move his bones. So they let his bones alone with the bones of the prophet who came from Samaria. If you're familiar with that account, the man of God ends up believing a lie. He ends up being killed. The old prophet, the one from Samaria, comes, takes him and buries him, and he ends up being buried next to this fella, next to the man of God. And I just to think about that right there, that verse. There's the gravestone. There's the gravestone. The prophecy was bones are going to be burned on that altar. And yet he looks over, whose gravestone is that? Oh, it's that guy who made the prophecy. And it's the fellow who tricked that guy who made the prophecy. And then the Lord spoke through the guy who had tricked him. And if you're not familiar with that account, go back and read it. I was just thinking about the idea of he being dead still speaks. I believe that's applied towards Abel in the New Testament. Perhaps others, and I think all the faithful of God, that it's like that. They being dead still speak. Whose bones are these? It's the man of God. Let them rest. Let them rest. As well as the fellow from Samaria. Let them both rest. Don't dig them up. They had been there a long time, and they would remain there. But that altar, it was done. That prophecy, it was fulfilled. It had been a long time coming. But here, right before captivity for Judah, the prophecy's fulfilled. God keeps his promises. God keeps his promises. And the sin was dealt with. Appreciate you. Hope you're having a good day. Hope you join us for our next brief look into the Bible.